Do you find it frustrating or depressing when you make mistakes in practice? In this video, I'll show you how to see them in a more positive light so they don't bother you so much. And that includes learning how to use them so that you make faster progress as well. Now, a lot of musicians seem to think that practice is all about avoiding mistakes. And while that is definitely true to a certain extent, there is a purpose to mistakes. They do have a role to play in your practice. And more than that, they are inevitably going to crop up some of the time, whether you like them or not. So having a positive reaction to them, a healthy reaction to them, is going to help your practice continue better when you do make them, rather than things sort of spiraling downhill a bit if you get frustrated with mistakes and react to them badly. What's your current attitude to mistakes? Let me know in the comments below. Now, I'm going to start by giving you a few ideas on how to helpfully react to mistakes in practice. But if this is something that you'd like to go deeper into, then definitely check out my video on attitudes to mistakes, both in practice and performance, that goes into more detail on ways to think about these things. So first, I just want you to remember that everyone makes mistakes because we're only human. It is inevitable that they will crop up. No one is free from this, and that's fine. More than that though, if you're making very few mistakes, no mistakes at all, something close to that, then this almost certainly means that you are not pushing the limits of what you can do. You're playing it very safe, you're staying close to the easy things, and you're not growing as a musician. So we actively actually want some mistakes because that's an inevitable result of what happens when we push the boundaries. But there's another way that you can look at mistakes as well, when it's perhaps not pushing the boundaries and deliberately going into new things, because they are showing you the things that you are not that good at. So if you think you're not pushing the boundaries and you're coming up against some mistakes, well, this is a clue to you that actually here is something that perhaps needs some work. Here is a way for me to get better. So see that as a positive thing. It is a signal that is going to allow you to improve as a musician. But there is a catch here, because once you notice a mistake in the way you're playing something, you need to be really careful about fixing it and fixing it repeatedly so that the correct way of doing it now becomes your default for the future. And that is a tricky thing to do, to change that and do the work so that it stays fixed and changed. And this need that you have to fix mistakes once you've made them really highlights the importance of awareness in your practice. Because you can only use mistakes to get better if you're aware that you've made them in the first place. Otherwise, perhaps the chance goes by and you don't work on this thing that you could improve, or worse, you keep repeating the mistake and that just becomes the way that you play now and becomes ever harder to change. So being aware of when you're making mistakes is hugely important. And in many ways, it can feel more comfortable not to be aware of the mistakes. It kind of feels like ignorance is bliss. But the trouble is that mistake, that weakness in your playing is still there, regardless of whether you're aware of it or not. So you're not gaining anything if you just let it slide under the radar and you carry on thinking your playing is great. The only way that you can really improve your playing is if you're aware of it. So just ask yourself whether there may be some subconscious thing going on where you're not paying as much attention to mistakes as you could, because you don't want to get that hurt feeling of realizing that there's an issue with your playing. And take some inspiration from looking at how high-performing medical teams in hospitals have done. People researched this and they assumed that what they would find is that they made fewer mistakes than the less good medical teams. But actually what they found was it was a similar number of mistakes, or perhaps even more mistakes, that the best teams were reporting. And what this is saying is that actually two things here. One is they were better at noticing mistakes in the first place, so they were aware of them and that allowed them to learn, helping them become those higher performing teams. But secondly, it's that they actually had the accountability, the guts to say, yes, we made a mistake, and write it down, record it, rather than just trying to sweep it under the carpet. Because again, you can be aware of these mistakes all you like, but if you don't admit them to yourself, if you don't take action, then they're not going to move you forward. So there are a few practical actions for you to take here. And the first that I'd suggest is to get in the habit of practicing much more slowly than you think you need to. Because this does two things. When you're practicing really slowly, it gives you a better chance of being aware of the mistakes in the first place. But also, once you've made a mistake, you're much more likely to be able to fix it repeatedly and iron it out of your issues if you're playing slowly rather than playing fast, in which case it's much harder to keep an eye on everything and that mistake may well creep back in again a few times. And you also need to develop this ability to notice imperfections, to be aware of them, while at the same time not being weighed down by that as a disappointment or a frustration. So what you're doing here is detaching any emotion on awareness of the mistake from spotting it. And a great way perhaps to do this is to flip things around, and rather than having the thought that comes into you is, oh, I've noticed a mistake, which because of the connections in our brain, mistake can just automatically trigger a negative reaction. What if every time this happens, you give yourself a pat on the back for demonstrating awareness and you think, excellent, I've been really aware, so I've spotted this thing. So that can be a way to take some of the negative emotions out of it. And if you'd like more help on staying positive when you notice mistakes, you might like to check out my video on reducing unhelpful self-criticism. And if you'd like to go really deep into this, then why not check out my course, Unlock Your Performance? There's a whole module on dealing with mistakes in there, plus a whole lot more as well. I'll put a link to it in the description below. I've been Mark Morley-Fletcher. Thanks so much for watching. Please click below to subscribe if you haven't done so already. And while you're down there, why not hit the share button as well to pass this video on to other musicians? Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.